Hi, this is Peter for The Movable Chef. Today I'd like to talk about the Bialetti Moka Express, pot for making mocha pot coffee. They're very, very common in Italy. I just read an article that 90% of Italian households at least own a Bialetti. When I lived in Italy, this was what people used for daily use for making coffee at home. They would often make a coffee latte in the morning, which was actually Moka Express coffee, and hot, not frothed, just hot milk to dilute it down a bit. So this was a very, very common way of making coffee. Clear up a couple of misconceptions. It's not espresso. It's called Moka Pot Express, not Espress. It's just the name of the pot. Espresso has a very different set of requirements. Espresso is generally brewed at about 9 bar. This generally generates about 1.1, 1.5 bar of pressure. So there's a huge pressure differential between making espresso with an espresso machine and making mocha pot coffee. So mocha pot coffee tends to be something sort of in between espresso and perhaps a strong filter coffee. It's almost more like a Turkish coffee in terms of consistency, mouthfeel, strength, stronger than your normal cup of joe, but not as concentrated as espresso. So just talking real quickly about the coffee maker, these are, like I said, very common in Italy. I've encountered them in other European countries. I've encountered them in Belgium. I've encountered them in Austria. I've encountered them in France. And I've also run into them in the Caribbean, and I think they're relatively common in South America. So you'll find these throughout the world. They're very commonly used. So even if you don't go out and plan to buy one, knowing how to use one could make the difference between having coffee some morning and not. So I'll show you how to use one in just a moment. Other notes about the Moka Express is that they now have a safety valve. We'll feature this a little bit later when we're talking about how to fill it, but this is kind of a new feature. They didn't used to have safety valves, which could be a problem if you used a really, really fine ground of coffee and overfilled it and tamped it down very tightly. You could get yourself in a little trouble. And the new safety valves are actually cleanable because apparently they're having problems with calcium deposits forming on the safety valves, and they wouldn't blow when they were supposed to. And so now you can actually pull it out a little bit. It's spring-loaded, kind of like a tire stem or something, but it pulls in the opposite direction. So apparently when you're washing it, every now and then you're supposed to agitate that valve just to keep any calcium deposits from forming on the inside and preventing it from doing its job, which is if you were to really catastrophically mess up the use of the machine so that it wouldn't blow up. I'm not sure if they would actually dramatically blow up or not. I've never heard of anyone being injured by one, but nevertheless a concern. In terms of construction of the pot, it unscrews into 2 pieces. The top part where the finished coffee goes, the bottom part where you put the grounds in the water. There's a pre-installed filter or screen on the bottom of the upper reservoir, and a gasket. And about the only maintenance you'd ever have to do is after several years of use, those gaskets eventually dry out and go bad. You pry it out with a teaspoon and you pop in another gasket, and they cost about $1 or $2. So these things last forever. They get passed down generation to generation. They're made out of cast aluminum, at least this one is. There's other versions in stainless. So as a travel coffee pot, it's great. You can toss this in your suitcase. Unless they run over it with the luggage handling truck, you're going to be able to make coffee just fine. It's pretty light. It's reasonably small because it makes concentrated coffee. This is considered a 6-cup pot rather. So you can see they're not very big cups. And you can dilute them with hot water or with hot milk as you desire for your morning coffee. So now let me go in and show you how to use this thing, and we'll move the camera a bit so you can see the close-up. So to use the mocha pot is pretty simple. I've seen guides recently where people are effectively complicating this process. They're preheating the water and such, and that probably could give you a better result, because one of the issues with the mocha pot is, since it's all aluminum, sometimes the coffee in the top reservoir kind of cooks a little bit by the time all the water comes out of the bottom reservoir. So maybe preheating the water is not a bad idea. Having said that, I never knew anybody who used these in Italy who preheated the water. So the water just gets added, generally cold water, just gets added to the bottom reservoir. The manual that comes with this will say something about filling water until you get to the registration marks or to the water level marks. just as someone who spent a lot of time looking for them, there are no such marks. What you want to do is you want to fill the water just up to below where the valve is, so just under the valve by like a centimeter or so. If you don't have a valve in your mocha pot and you're a daring soul who wants to use it anyway, the way to see how full to get the water is to make sure that no water intrudes into this funnel-shaped grounds cone when it's inserted all the way. So you can hold it in the side and see about where the bottom of this funnel is, or pop it inside and make sure that no water comes up through this filter cone or filter funnel, and that's how much water you should have, as much as you can get in without it intruding into this. To fill this, once again, probably the ideal would be freshly ground, locally roasted, freshly roasted coffee, ground at something less than an espresso grind. Now the grind for this, the proper grind, is finer than a filter coffee grind and not as fine as an espresso grind. If you get it too fine, that's where you get problems with an overpressure situation in the bottom pot. Although, like I said, I've never actually seen that, and I've stuffed these things full of coffee many times. So to fill this, you take your coffee, which is, like I said, not quite an espresso ground. You don't want it to be caking necessarily. And you fill this little coffee filter, metal coffee filter, all the way to the top. I actually even fill it slightly over the top. I'm just using Lavazza fine ground espresso coffee in a can from the store. That is pretty much what everyone in Naples used. Or they would use Kimbo, which was a big local brand that everyone liked. Every now and then you'd see someone using Ely. Ely was probably, the premier or the premium coffee. It was also from up north, and so you kind of have a north-south thing going on in Italy where the Southerners didn't cater to the northern products quite as much, and so the local brands of Kimbo were more common. And then I just loosely pack this down. I'm not tamping it. I'm not packing it like you would espresso. I just don't want it to get all over the rubber gasket here. So just loosely tamp it down, and you screw the top reservoir on. Really tight, and it goes right on a burner on the stove. This is my gas stove is a very high flame, so I actually set it slightly off center so that the plastic handle doesn't get in full force of the flame. And then you want kind of a medium flame on this. You don't want to just torch it because that will just sort of worsen the problem about this top reservoir getting really hot and cooking the coffee. So now we're going to put this on the burner, and what will happen is the water in the bottom will boil, generate steam. The steam will generate pressure, not a lot, a little bit of pressure, and that pressure will force the water down and then up through that siphon that makes up the coffee cone. And then that will come up into the upper reservoir. And you see there's a little tower here where the water will come out of, and that will make the coffee. One thing that was common, and I used to see people do in Naples, was they would take a small metal pot, almost like a steaming pot for milk, and put all the sugar for the pot of coffee in that. And when the first few drops of coffee came out from the top of the mocha pot, they'd pour that in and cream it with the sugar, almost like you're making a very concentrated frosting or something. They would use a spoon and cream that sugar and the first few drops of coffee together. And then when you poured the coffee into that metal container after it was brewed, it would be almost like a crema, kind of like a fake crema on top. I'm not sure what's different. I've tried doing that the last couple times and couldn't get it to work anymore. I used to do this all the time 15 years ago, but so either the sugar's different or the coffee's different or I'm different. But in any case, if you see people doing that, that's the attempt, is to kind of do a pseudo crema. And we'll just let this go, and we'll check back on it in a couple minutes. Okay, we're gonna see if we can get an action shot here of the coffee actually starting to brew. The water's been on the boil here for about a minute. It should be getting pretty close. And you'll see that the coffee start to first kind of ooze over the side, and it'll start to sputter a little bit, and then it should come in a steady stream. And here we go. The first drops are coming out, and that's probably a cough a little bit, is what they call it, where it spits some coffee, and then it just will pick up a steady stream. This is actually just sort of skipping the cough step. But you see it coming out in a trickle. This will speed up as the water begins to come down, and it will get hotter faster, and the pressure will increase rapidly, and it'll just sort of sputtering out. That means it's probably a good time to consider closing the lid, because when it gets to the very tail end, when there's more steam than water, this will tend to sort of sputter or blow coffee out, and I'm wearing a white shirt. So let's close the lid, and this should be done hopefully in about 45 seconds. Okay, I can hear that this is just about done. It's just sort of sputtering towards the end. So as soon as it's finished, you want to get this off of the heat. We don't want to cook that upper chamber any more than we need to. And then I'll go ahead and warm a little bit of milk up. It's already warming. And we'll take a look at sort of a standard way of drinking this, which was a little bit of hot milk. Not just in Italy as a cafe au lait, but this would be another way of making a very sort of standard cafe con leche. You would do the hot milk separately, add it to the very strong coffee with usually plenty of sugar, and even a home preparation of Cuban coffee or cafe cubano would be sort of the same process, using something like a Moka Express, because around the world most people don't have $3,000 or $4,000 espresso machines in their home. That's how they'll get their coffee at lunchtime or in the midday as a coffee break, quick espresso at the cafe. But at home, people are using things like this Moka Express to make a relatively strong mocha pot coffee, which is sort of the practical way of making espresso at home. All right, so the milk's warm. I know I'm pouring this into a small glass as opposed to a cup. Before anyone wants to send me hate mail about that not being traditional or appropriate, yeah, I know. I just wanted to show the consistency of the coffee, and I don't have any clear coffee mugs or coffee cups. So I'll use this little Luminart glass, and you can see that it pours a little more easily than an espresso would. It's very thick, very dark, slightly muddy in complexion, because it doesn't have any paper to extract a lot of that, the fine particular particles or the oils out. But this was the sort of the standard cup. Then add hot milk, preheated milk to taste, because you don't have a large volume of coffee there. You don't want to cool it off with cold milk. So something along those lines would be cafe au lait or cafe cubano or cafe con leche, maybe a little bit more milk. And that would be purely a breakfast drink. In the afternoons, you're probably out in town anyway. You'd have an espresso, and cappuccinos were really, cafe au laits were really just a breakfast item. So there we have it. This was the Bialetti Moka Express. This was the 6-cup version, one of the larger models. And this is the way you prepare coffee with a moka pot. Certainly if you were to use really freshly roasted, just ground coffee, you might be able to get a little bit of a crema by brewing it through the Moka Express, but you're really talking something which is going to have maybe 10 or 15% of the pressure that would be used in a commercial espresso machine. So you're not really going to get that thick, holds the sugar up kind of crema. And it's not espresso, it's moka pot coffee. It's a different thing, but it's a thing which a lot of the world brews and really enjoys. And I hope you give it a shot. And if you don't feel the need to go out and get a moka pot, certainly if you ever run into one in the wild, you'll know how to use it now. So this has been Peter with The Movable Chef. You can check out my story about, my extended story about the Bialetti on the website, and see a lot of other great information there about food, coffee, and travel. Thanks so much.